Now, conservatives have been saying that we need to begin to reopen the country. We need to reopen it now in order to avoid an economic situation that will hurt people far more than this COVID-19 nonsense. Again, that's their perspective, right? I mean, why don't we think of the poor people? Why don't we think of the working class, the average American? We got to send those people right back to work. I mean, so that they can make money, you know? I mean, that's why we have to send them back into the pandemic because, God forbid, we pay them to sit at home. Yes, there are people that literally do believe that. You might actually believe that it's better to send them back out. But in reality, I think this is one of those rare situations where we would prefer, for the time being, everybody sit home and collect a government check. I know. Somehow someone's going to find that incredibly offensive and say, oh, how dare you tell people to sit home and collect a government check? What are you, a communist? I mean, whatever. If you want to call me that, that's fine. But that's smart when it comes to a pandemic. Now, unfortunately, that's not a winning argument when it comes to state governments run by Republicans, as well as, of course, the federal government, which is run by Republicans and even corporate Democrats. They have been encouraging a lot of the states to open up. And some have. You have Florida, you have South Carolina, and you also have Georgia. Now, Georgia opened up first, and they opened up pretty aggressively. And so they are kind of a testing ground, right, for the argument that conservatives are making that the sooner that we open up, the sooner everything's going to be back to normal and the economy will recover, right? Because people want to go back to work. People want to get back to normal. Well, now, how's that experiment going in opening up to have everything in the economy get back to normal? Now, look, I talk about the death toll all the time, right? How places that have opened up, like Georgia, have already seen spikes in coronavirus cases. So I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking clearly about the economics of the situation. Have the jobs returned in Georgia? Are people back to work? Is the economy booming again? Well, no, they're not. According to Politico, the state has continued to hemorrhage jobs, even though businesses have gotten the go-ahead to open up and rehire people, bring people back to work. Now, according to the outlet here, weekly applications for jobless benefits have remained so elevated that Georgia now leads the country in terms of the proportion of its workforce applying for unemployment assistance. So it appears to have had the opposite effect. So I don't think that's correlated to opening up and having more unemployment and leading the nation in unemployment. But you do see that it didn't help, that it didn't lead to more people being employed. In fact, you have almost half of the population of Georgia that are on unemployment benefits right now. 40.3% of the state's worker, 2 in 5 have filed for unemployment. Damn. In raw numbers, a total of 243,000 Georgia residents had filed for jobless claims 2 weeks ago, and another 177,000 filed for jobless claims just this week. And those are just the past couple of weeks. And then, we've got even more people that have filed for unemployment since mid-March. Now, the state says that the retail, social assistance, and healthcare industries are continuing to shed jobs at a rapid clip. Well, now, wait a minute. If you're all opened up, shouldn't that not be the case? Shouldn't the business get back to being absolutely booming as everybody, because we keep hearing from these anti-stay-at-home protests, right? From these protesters that, give me liberty or give me COVID and give me both as long as I can go get a haircut. Well, okay, you opened up the haircut, the salons, right? So there should be a flood of people going out there to get haircuts. People should be wanting to go back into the restaurants as you're allowing people back into the restaurants. Oh, that's not the case. Interesting. Very interesting. Not exactly the kind of recovery that they were asking for, right? So now Alex Carmadell, senior policy analyst with the nonprofit Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, had something to say about this. She tells Politico that persistently high jobless claims, even after the reopening, show that there's, quote, certainly nothing to signal there's any return to economic stability or recovery happening right now. You want to know why? I mean, here's what I think. It's because we have a freaking pandemic right now. Most Americans agree with remaining in quarantine, even if they don't like it. They're still smart enough to do it, and are okay again with lockdowns and doing social distancing, and not going out to eat or get haircuts, right? And so this is even if it harms the economy. They say we understand that there's a risk to the economy, but we're not ready to go out because we're not ready to sacrifice grandma to the altar of Wall Street. So that's the issue, right? So yes, most Georgians, they're staying home because they trust the science, they trust the scientists, they trust the doctors, people like Dr. Fauci on the coronavirus response team, and Dr. Bright as well, and they believe that human lives are important. They actually do believe that, quote unquote, all lives matter, unlike a lot of these protests, which again I've seen them hold signs like "sacrifice the weak" in order to open up the economy. So that's a problem, right? So now, look, we don't like being locked down. We don't like being financially wrecked, right? And that's what Republicans are counting on. They made sure to pass the very minimal amount of assistance to regular people so that at some point we are going to be clamoring to get out because we can't afford to feed our kids, right? And we can't afford to pay our bills. And so, yes, they've counted on that. And that's government in action for you. But that government in action, it's a man-made problem. They could fix it if they wanted to, but they actually don't want to. And that's one of the big problems. Now, Republicans, these Republican politicians, they're saying, no, the lack of economic activity that's going on in the country, it's not because people want to stay home and protect their families. No, it's because the government's been too generous. Yeah. They point at the $600 unemployment benefit as the reason. They say, well, obviously people are not going to want to go back to work if we're paying them to stay home. Well, of course not. And we're paying them more to stay home. Well, this is one thing to me, that the companies weren't paying them enough to begin with. But there's other problems with that argument. For one, if your job, like say your boss, says, okay, I'm ready to open up. I don't care. I don't care if Corona is still raging. Let's get back to work. So I'm going to call in a couple of my employees. Well, those employees, if they're on unemployment, if they refuse to come back to work, guess what? They lose that unemployment. I'm pretty sure a lot of Republicans don't admit that when they make those arguments. Like, oh, I can't believe these people would just stay home on unemployment. Well, they don't have a choice. Their employer, if they're home on unemployment, it means their employer doesn't want them to come back to work. And if their employer does, then they have to come back to work. It's as simple as that. So that's one of the problems, right? Now, again, that means local businesses, as a result, are not reopening en masse despite being able to do so. So these businesses are like, no, we're not ready to open up yet. Or we don't have the customer base to be able to open up. And look, that's another part of people wanting to stay home is they're not going out and frequenting these businesses. In fact, Laura Wheatler, Associate Director of the Center for State and Local Finance at Georgia State, tells Politico that simply reopening the economy during a pandemic will not bring you demand. Quote, think of a restaurant. They're not going to be able to bring back their entire staff because they're not going to have the clientele. Yeah, people are actually going to have to go out and want to be frequenting these restaurants. These sit-down restaurants. Now, a lot of restaurants are doing carry-out or delivery services. And understandably, some restaurants can't with the way that they're structured or, what they do. And so these are the places that were going to reopen, right? Well, they're not ready to reopen. And it's not just about restaurants, of course. It's about other things that you can't, massage parlors, nail salons, hair salons, things like that. Drive-in, or not drive-in movie theaters, but normal movie theaters and other non-essential businesses that want to open up. Bars are another good example of this, right? Not exactly an essential business. They're not opening up. And so, or even if they are, they're just not getting enough people to bring everyone back to work. And so that's the problem, right? And another part of that could be the fact that people either don't want or don't have the money to spend or to see, to go out to the bar, to see a movie or anything like that. So meaning the demand for those goods and services, they're just not there. And it's obviously not going to return to what it was. You know what that means? Economic recession, possibly depression, and a very slow economic recovery, which also means high unemployment. So you have to understand, the economy isn't going to bounce back. It's already off track. This is going to be very slow, and it's going to be painful for quite some time. The question is, what do you do, right? Considering how this isn't a normal situation because we have a pandemic, well, we've got to deal with that first. And that means, of course, containing the virus. Now, you do that by developing a vaccine or a treatment. Now, we've got a vaccine that's doing clinical trials. It seems promising in the first stage of clinical trials, but understand that there are multiple stages for these. So we're not necessarily guaranteed that this is going to work for human beings, right? And so, look, that's a thing. Now, the other thing that you could do as well is make it so that we can quickly react to any outbreaks and prevent the spread from going into the general population. Now, that takes aggressive testing, quarantining, and contact tracing, stuff that we should have been doing from the beginning, because then we would actually start to have a handle on it and could begin to slowly reopen the economy. Now, we're not doing that again, but assuming we did and we contain the virus and we eventually get a vaccine, well, that's wonderful. That solves the containment of the virus problem. But you still have the economic problems caused by this and the massive disruption. So what you got to do is you got to rebuild demand, right? Well, the best way to stimulate the economy is to get people to spend money. But people can't spend money that they don't have. People will spend money that they do have, if, of course, it doesn't go to servicing debt or paying rent or mortgages, which is why I'm saying, of course, we should be doing a temporary moratorium on rents and mortgages throughout this crisis until this virus is contained, which could be, it could be a while. It could be 6 months, could be a year. That sucks, but what are you going to do, right? You have to react to the virus because it is a serious issue. And it's also a serious health issue and an economic issue. So you have to work on that economic issue as well. And so you have to make sure that at the other end of this, people will have money to spend. That creates jobs. It's really kind of Econ 101. This is very basic stuff, right? Our immediate concern, again, is getting a handle on the virus. And we have not. And that's why we have a lot of economic pain. And as a bonus, right, the way that we're doing it right now, tens of thousands more Americans will needlessly die in the process of doing what we're doing, opening up before we're ready, which is what they're doing, of course, in these states and what other states are planning to do already. Now, that, of course, takes into account the fact that human beings are human, right? And that we should respect life. But our government, unfortunately, doesn't, because it's controlled by corporations who must maximize profit regardless of the human cost. And so, unfortunately, I don't see us getting out of this situation without a massive, massive toll on both human lives and the economy. It's disastrous all the way around. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc. We're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.